Hello there, HLTV fantasy enjoyers. We are going to be kicking off with IEM Chengdu in the group stages, the first proper event after the major has concluded, which is always a bit of a weird point in CS's kind of lifespan with teams and potential roster changes. And a lot of players, if we're being honest, they mainly focus on the major. And after the major is done, there's this big decompression and sort of coming down and trying to take more of a relaxed approach for a little while afterwards. Some teams definitely do better than others, so it's always a bit of a strange one. These games just after the major is finished, but I did get top 15%. I said in my last video I was going to be trying to really risk it because I was quite a few points away, and it was successful. I got top 15. A lot of people went for Spirit. They went for the safe choices, and I said in my video I wasn't sold on Spirit to actually go far. I thought the inexperience of Donk and Zontix in particular would really shine through, and it did. Zontix had a really rough one, and the same could be said of Mouse as well, down on the other side of the bracket, where Jimmy's a phenomenal player and he's going to have a very, very bright future ahead of him. But I thought it was too young and too soon for this team to really ball out of control at the major. A lot of people thought they would go through at the finals. I just couldn't see it happening, and it didn't. So Vitality, unfortunately, also didn't perform the way I was hoping them to. I thought, as you know, defending champions, sure, it was a while ago. They get their first win against Cloud9, against great confidence builder, and then they just went a bit flat against FaZe, and FaZe steamrolled across to the finals. And then, obviously, as we all know, they hit a bit of a stumbling block. Eternal Fire didn't do as well as I was hoping for. I honestly thought they would carry on their progression and their momentum and they'd be able to beat down Na'Vi. Wasn't the case, and obviously Na'Vi ended up winning the major. So top 15%, I'll take it. I'm up to the top 6 now in the Celebrity League, which is great. Made huge strides. Actually, I'm joint 5th technically with Note, so fingers crossed I can get a good performance here and we can actually breach into that top 5, which is really what I'm aiming to do. So with that being said, let's close those because we are here for IEM Chengdu, obviously taking place in China. We have 2 Chinese teams, and they're both in Group A, and they're also both on the same side of the bracket as well, so that could be quite interesting. So you got G2 and 9Z, Liquid Heroic, Fury, Vision, Tyloo, and Mouse in Group A, and then Group B, and obviously these are the first matchups as well. In Group B, FaZe Namiga, Monty Astralis, Cloud9 FlyQuest, who of course are previously Greyhound, got picked up by FlyQuest, Wildcard against VP. So we do have some rosters here that have already had changes and are kind of going through a transitional phase. Obviously Monty, one of the teams that stands out in that regard. Some Young no longer in the team. They brought back Gizmy as well, this UK talent who played at the RMRs for the first game because SDY was sick. And then he came back and Gizmy was sent back home. It was a bit of a strange one, but obviously Monty are in a transitional phase, and I think that could potentially harm them against Astralis, a team that's going to be hungry, having not been at the major, sitting back and just watching and hopefully absorbing and really learning a lot about what they witnessed, to come through here and make a declaration like, listen, we might not have been at the major, but this team is the real deal. And obviously with Blame F being catapulted out of the team and Device now taking that leadership role, I'm going to be curious to see what Astralis actually have up their sleeve. They've had plenty of time to prepare at this point at least. So off this basis, I would say this side of the bracket of A is the most stacked. You got G2, Liquid, and Heroic. No disrespect to 9Z. It is a best of one, so you never know what can happen. But you'd expect G2 to deal with them fairly convincingly. And then Heroic probably should beat Liquid, but it's going to be a much more difficult game because Liquid, in the same sense as Astralis, points to prove, now had more time together. They were a fairly young roster in the RMRs where they had a very disappointing, loss basically and didn't make it. So I would imagine that Cadian and the rest of them have been putting in some hard work, ready to come in here and really show the world what they're capable of doing. So this is a lot more, I would say, on paper at least, with all the caveats of post-major blues and decompression and some teams not really maybe looking at this tournament as focused as they should be because all their effort, all their energy was put on the major. This, for me, on paper, should be the most difficult and the most competitive of either of the brackets on this side. On this bottom side, Fury, Vision, Tyloo, and Mouse. Obviously, the 2 Chinese teams playing on home soil could give them a bit of a buff. But realistically, Mouse and Furia should win their games. I mean, Furia maybe less so because they look shocking at the major, but Mouse should, in paper, have a fairly straightforward trajectory straight to the upper finals, in all honesty, where maybe they'll have a chance at a bit of redemption and revenge against G2 in that best of 3 after getting knocked out in the quarterfinals to G2, obviously in the major not long ago. But you have to look at Mouse and think, like, this has to be 2 wins at least. You know, best one against Matt Tyloo, got to get that W, and then Fury or Linvision the best of 3. You're just looking at Mouse to have this. Mouse looked amazing at the major for the most part. I think some people definitely overplayed their 3-0 run. I've already discussed that in my previous videos, where they got wins, but they were close ones, and they blew out Complexity, who didn't really look like they knew what was going on at the time. And then obviously in the quarters, they had a bit of a choke. There's a lot of pressure and stresses, and obviously the stage invasion is going to probably knock younger guys off keel. You know, it's not a comfortable position to be in at all. I think that definitely contributed to the whole situation for Mouse. And now that they've had a chance to kind of take a couple of deep breaths, I think this is where they're going to hit the ground running, and this is going to be a big tournament for Mouse. I actually think Mouse could potentially win the whole thing. I'd be surprised if they don't go really far. On the Group B side of things, it's a little bit more, I wouldn't say one-sided, but I think things should fall into place a lot more easily. Like, FaZe have got to beat Namiga. Again, though, how much time have they prepped post-major for this tournament? I'm not sure it's much, if any. If they have been right back on the saddle, fair play. But I feel like the nature and how they lost those finals is enough to put anyone in a position where they just want to turn their brain off for a few weeks and just not think about anything to do with Counter-Strike, and you couldn't blame them, right? So are FaZe able to recover and put themselves into good stead for this? I'm not sure. Namiga's not a pushover team, better than a lot of people expect. Monty and Astralis should win that team, so it should be FaZe and Astralis in the top part. Cloud9 and VP, if we're being honest, should have a very straightforward run to the upper semi-finals, where I think VP should beat Cloud9 and go into the finals as well. On paper, you'd think FaZe and VP will be in the upper finals, with the other teams kind of finding their way through. So the reason I'm going through all of those is because I've decided again to double stack with 2 teams. The 2 teams that I feel have a pretty decent chance of going through without dropping maps, without dropping many rounds, and therefore stacking a bunch of points for me. So I've decided to go for Jimmy and Shui on the side of Mouse. Again, I think they have a point to prove. After that major, they're starting against Tyloo. Their second game is against Linvision or Fury, assuming that they beat Tyloo, which they should. And those are 2 very straightforward games. You'd think, at least on paper, for Mouse to have a fairly straightforward trajectory straight through the group stage. And then I've double stacked with VP as well, because the same can be said for them. Wildcard, I mean, they've got to be beating Wildcard, one of the weakest teams here. And then you have Cloud9 or FlyQuest. Like, Cloud9 should win that game. Cloud9 won't be a pushover, absolutely not. Could be a difficult game for VP, but I think VP are just a better team overall than Cloud9 are. If we're being honest, if the James Crash situation doesn't happen, VP are probably in the playoffs, and I wouldn't have been surprised if VP actually ended up beating Na'Vi in the semi-finals and got themselves across to the finals. That's how thin of margins these are, and VP typically don't choke in those kind of very pressured situations for the most part. James handled it like an absolute trooper, like a complete legend. And so I think that kind of mentality shows you that VP, they're going to be focused. They're going to be coming in here and they're going to be looking for blood. They're going to be looking for a W. So I think that stacking VP is a pretty safe bet. I've gone for Carrigan. This is a little bit more of a coin flip. It was between Carrigan and Hooksy for me. And the reason I've gone for Carrigan is because of how stacked the top part of this bracket is. And whereas you could say, you know, Carrigan getting through to the finals, is he fully focused? Is he able to reset mentally? You could say the same for G2. You know, there's a lot of people out there saying, you know, kick Hooksy, get rid of Hooksy right now. So not sure what to make of G2's current standing. Nico has been blowing hot and cold. You've seen great performances. You've seen lackluster performances. The one constant about G2 is that Munaci's a complete monster. And he always has been. And he always seemingly will be. He's not had any dips in form. He's not had any bad performances, it seems. He's always there. He's always killing. He's always doing his job. But I feel like FaZe, with Carrigan posting up some really big performances individually, yes, a lot of people focused, I think unfairly, on the fact that the last map he only dropped a kill or 2. Up until that point, Carrigan was so good for FaZe throughout the entire playoffs. He was on point. Some of that may have been down to the Danish crowd playing on home soil. He's not going to be playing on home soil here. He's going to be in China. It's a bit of a gamble. It's a bit of a risk. But I think I've got to back the teams that on paper at least are the best teams on the planet. And FaZe are one of those teams. They just got through to the grand finals. They beat Spirit. They beat Vitality on their way there. Two super legit teams. And they narrowly lost to Na'Vi. And honestly, they could have won that game. So that's my team. Feel pretty good about it overall. My roles are attacker for Jimmy, leader for Shui. I've got support on Norbert, as he always seems to be up around the 25% mark. Obviously, for Jane, we're going to go for main AWP, and then Carrigan does love to get himself some eco frags. He is definitely an eco frag kind of machine with those SMGs and even force buying pistols. So there's my team. Do you agree or disagree? Comment below and let me know, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.